My name is Simone Carter. I'm 34 years old. I'm a pharmacist in Houston, Texas. And right now I'm standing in a restaurant full of 60 people watching my husband pour something into my champagne glass. He doesn't know I can see him. He doesn't know I've been watching him for 3 months. And he definitely doesn't know that I recognize exactly what's in that little glass vial because I've spent my entire career surrounded by drugs, chemicals, and compounds that can save a life or end one. He walks back to me with that smile, that beautiful lying smile. He hands me the glass and says,
"To us, baby, 8 years.
I take the glass, I smile back, and I let him make his toast. But I don't drink. What my husband didn't know was that the trap tonight wasn't his. It was mine. Before I tell you how I got here, drop a comment right now with where you're watching from and what time it is. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Trust me, you're going to want to hear every single second of this. But to understand how I ended up standing in that restaurant with poison in my glass and a smile on my face, I need to take you back 8 years to the day I met the man who would one day try to kill me. I grew up in 3rd Ward, Houston. If you know Houston, you know 3rd Ward. It's got history, it's got soul, and it's got people who look out for each other like family, even when they're not blood. My daddy, Ernest Carter, was the heart of that neighborhood. He owned Carter Family Pharmacy on Wheeler Avenue for over 30 years. Everybody knew him. Everybody trusted him. He wasn't just filling prescriptions. He was checking on Miss Dorothy's blood pressure every Tuesday, making sure old Mr. Jenkins actually took his diabetes medication instead of hiding it under his tongue and giving free advice to single mamas who couldn't afford a doctor visit. That pharmacy wasn't just a business. It was a lifeline. I grew up behind that counter. By the time I was 12, I could organize a shelf faster than any of his employees. By 16, I knew the difference between every type of antibiotic on that wall. My daddy used to look at me and say, "Simone, God gave you a sharp mind. Don't ever let anybody dull it." I carried those words like armor my whole life. I went to Texas Southern University, then pharmacy school at the University of Houston. Graduated top of my class, came right back to 3rd Ward and started working alongside my daddy at the pharmacy. Those were the best years, me and him side by side serving our community. My older brother Malcolm was in the Army stationed overseas most of the time, so it was just me and Daddy holding it down. Then the cancer came. Pancreatic. Stage 4 by the time they found it. My daddy was gone in 5 months. I was 26 years old, and the man who taught me everything, the man who was my whole world, was just gone. Like that. One day, he was behind the counter joking with customers, and 5 months later, I was standing over his grave in a black dress, trying to remember how to breathe. He left me the pharmacy. Everything. The building, the inventory, the licenses, the relationships with every supplier and every customer. It was worth about $1.2 million when you added it all up. But to me, it was worth more than any number. It was his legacy. It was his love wrapped up in brick and mortar and shelves full of medicine. I threw myself into that pharmacy like my life depended on it. Because it did. Without my daddy, that pharmacy was all I had left of him. I worked 14-hour days, 6 days a week. I modernized the inventory system, expanded the wellness section, started a free blood pressure screening program every Saturday. Within 2 years, revenue was up 40%. My daddy would have been proud. But I was lonely. God, I was lonely. Malcolm was still in the Army, stationed in Fort Bragg. My best friend Denise Howard had just started her law practice in Montrose and was drowning in casework. And me, I was going home every night to an empty apartment that smelled like takeout and silence. That's when Garrett walked in. Garrett Jerome Mitchell. 30 years old, 6 feet 1 inch tall, with a smile that could charm the thorns off a rose bush. He was a pharmaceutical sales rep for a mid-size company, and he came into my pharmacy one Wednesday afternoon in April to pitch a new line of generic medications. Most reps were in and out in 10 minutes. Garrett stayed for 2 hours. He asked me about the pharmacy's history, about my daddy, about the community. He listened like every word mattered, and when he left, he said,
"Miss Carter, I don't know who's luckier this neighborhood for having you or that pharmacy for having someone who loves it this much."
I won't lie. That line worked on me. It worked because it didn't feel like a line. It felt like someone finally seeing me. Not just the pharmacist, not just Ernest Carter's daughter, but me. Simone. The woman behind the counter who was holding everything together with both hands and pretending she wasn't exhausted. He came back the next week, and the week after that. By the third visit, he wasn't even pretending to pitch medications anymore. He brought me lunch, jerk chicken from that Jamaican spot on Alameda. Remembered I'd mentioned I loved it during our first conversation. That's the thing about Garrett. He remembered everything. Every detail, every little thing you said in passing. At the time, I thought it was because he cared. Looking back, I realize it was because he was studying me, learning my weaknesses, cataloging every vulnerability for later. But I didn't see that then. All I saw was a man who made me laugh for the first time since my daddy died, a man who showed up, a man who held my hand across a restaurant table and said,
You've been carrying everything alone for too long, Simone. Let me help you carry it.
We dated for a year and a half. He proposed on the rooftop of Hotel Granduca with the Houston skyline behind us, and a 2-carat ring he said he'd been saving for since the day he met me. I said yes before he finished the question. We got married at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church, the same church my parents got married in. Malcolm flew in from North Carolina to walk me down the aisle since Daddy couldn't. Denise was my maid of honor. She cried through the whole ceremony, but later that night at the reception, she pulled me aside and said something I wish I'd paid more attention to.
Simone, I love you, and I want to be wrong about this, but something about Garrett feels too perfect. Just promise me you'll keep your eyes open.
I hugged her and said, Denise, relax. He's a good man. I meant it. I believed it with everything I had. 2 years into the marriage, our daughter Zora was born. 6 pounds, 11 ounces with her grandfather's eyes and her mama's lungs. She screamed so loud in that delivery room the nurses were laughing. Garrett was right there, tears running down his face, holding her like she was made of glass. He kissed my forehead and whispered,
Thank you for making me a father. I'm going to give you both the world.
For a while, it really felt like he meant it. We were a family. Sunday mornings at church with Zora in her little white dress, Saturday evenings on the porch with sweet tea, while Zora chased fireflies in the yard, Garrett cooking breakfast on weekdays while I got ready for the pharmacy. It was simple. It was beautiful. It was everything I'd ever wanted. Then around year 3, something shifted. It was small. So small I almost missed it. Garrett came home one Tuesday evening and told me he'd switched companies.
Better opportunity?
He said.
More money, more flexibility.
I asked him what the new company was called. He paused for just a second too long.
It's a smaller firm.
He said.
You wouldn't know it. Don't worry about it, babe.
Don't worry about it. I wish I had pushed harder that day. I wish I had asked, the name, looked it up, called them. But I didn't. Because I trusted him. Because trusting him was easier than questioning him. Because questioning him meant admitting that maybe Denise was right, and I wasn't ready for that. So I let it go. I smiled and said, That's great, baby. I'm proud of you. And the lie just sat there between us, quiet as a seed buried in soil. I didn't know it yet, but that seed had already started growing roots. And by the time I finally saw what it had become, it had wrapped itself around everything I loved and started squeezing. The next 2 years moved like a river that looks calm on the surface, but has a dangerous current underneath. If you'd looked at us from the outside, you would have seen a beautiful black family living a beautiful life. Pharmacist wife, charming husband, adorable little girl, nice house in Riverside Terrace, 2 cars in the driveway, church every Sunday. But underneath all that beauty, something was rotting. I just couldn't smell it yet. Garrett stopped bringing in money around the same time he switched companies. But the spending didn't stop. New shoes, new watch, dinners with clients I'd never heard of. He always had an explanation, always had a reason, and those reasons always came wrapped in that smile of his.
Investment in my image, babe. You got to spend money to make money.
I'd nod and go back to balancing the pharmacy's books, which were now quietly covering every single bill in our household. The mortgage, The car payments, Zora's preschool tuition at a Montessori program in the medical center, the groceries, the utilities, the insurance premiums. Every last dollar came from Carter Family Pharmacy, and Garrett's contribution was exactly zero. But I didn't complain. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself he was building something. I told myself that a good wife supports her husband through the hard times, because that's what my mama did for my daddy when the pharmacy almost went under in '97. You hold on. You keep the faith. You don't quit on your family. The last truly happy memory I have of us was our 6th anniversary. Garrett surprised me. He sent Zora to his mother Vivian's house for the night, filled our bedroom with candles, and cooked shrimp scampi from scratch. He even burned the garlic bread, and we laughed about it so hard that tears were running down my face. After dinner, he put on Anita Baker, pulled me into the kitchen, and we slow danced between the stove and the refrigerator in our socks. He held me close and whispered,
I don't deserve you, Simone.
I pressed my face against his chest and said, Yes, you do. I replay that moment sometimes, that dance, that whisper. And I wonder if he was already planning it then, if he was already talking to her, if the guilt was sitting in his throat while his arms were wrapped around me, or if there was no guilt at all, if he was just performing like he'd been performing since the day he walked into my pharmacy with that smile and that jerk chicken. I'll never know. And honestly, I've stopped wanting to. About 3 months after that anniversary, I found the first crack. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Zora had a dentist appointment that morning, and I'd come home early to change before heading to the pharmacy for the afternoon shift. Garrett was supposed to be at a client meeting in Dallas. That's what he'd told me the night before. Dallas, 3.5 hours away. Full-day trip. I was sorting through the mail on the kitchen counter when I noticed a credit card statement I didn't recognize. It wasn't from our joint account. It was a card in Garrett's name only from a bank I'd never heard of. I almost put it down. Almost. But something made me open it. There was a charge for a hotel in Galveston, the Tremont House, $412 for one night. Dated the same weekend, Garrett said he was in Dallas. My stomach did this slow, sickening flip. Galveston is south. Dallas is north. They're not even close. When Garrett came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the statement in front of me. I kept my voice light, almost casual, like I was asking about the weather. Hey babe, I found this credit card bill. There's a hotel charge in Galveston from 2 weeks ago. I thought you were in Dallas that weekend.
Oh, the meeting got moved last minute. Client had a beach house situation down in Galveston, so we relocated. Didn't I tell you? I could have sworn I mentioned it.
He hadn't. I knew he hadn't. But his voice was so steady, so confident, so completely unbothered that I felt foolish for even asking. Like I was the one being unreasonable. Like checking a credit card statement made me a suspicious wife instead of a concerned partner. No, you didn't mention it, I said quietly.
Well, I'm sorry, babe. It was last minute. You know how these things go.
He kissed my forehead, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and walked into the living room like the conversation was over. And just like that, it was. Because I let it be. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. I just didn't want to see them. Around that same time, Garrett started asking questions. Not normal questions, specific questions. Questions about money and documents and things that had nothing to do with his daily life.
Hey, babe, when's the last time you updated the beneficiary on your life insurance? How much is the pharmacy actually worth if you sold it today? Did your daddy leave a will, or did everything just go straight to you and Malcolm? What happens to the pharmacy if something ever happened to you? Does it go to Zora? Does Malcolm get a share?
Each question came at a different time, in a different context, spread out over weeks so they never felt connected. While we were cooking dinner, during a commercial break, in the car on the way to church, always casual, always wrapped in a smile and a logical explanation.
I just want to make sure we're protected, babe. What if something happens to one of us? We've got Zora to think about.
I answered every single one, openly, honestly. Like a fool handing a burglar the keys to her own house. It was Denise who noticed. She came over for wine one Friday night after Garrett had taken Zora to a movie. I was telling her about how Garrett had been asking about the pharmacy's valuation, and she put her glass down mid-sip.
Simone, why is your husband suddenly so interested in what your assets are worth?
He's being responsible, Denise, planning for the future.
Girl?
She looked at me with those lawyer eyes, the ones that could see through a lie from across a courtroom.
In my experience, when a man who doesn't contribute financially starts asking detailed questions about his wife's assets estate plan and life insurance, it's not because he's planning for the future. It's because he's planning for a future without her in it.
The words hit me like ice water. I actually flinched. That's a terrible thing to say.
I know it is, and I pray I'm wrong, but promise me you'll pay attention. Just pay attention.
I promised, but I didn't pay attention. Not really. Not enough. Because paying attention would have meant accepting that the life I'd built, the family I'd fought for, the man I'd given my heart to, was a lie. And I wasn't ready to let that life die. But the life was already dead. I just hadn't found the body yet. Denise was right to be suspicious, but it would take me another 2 years to understand why. And by then my husband had already found the woman who would help him plan my murder. A woman whose name I didn't even know yet. A woman who had done this before, 6 months before the anniversary dinner. That's when my body started telling me what my heart refused to believe. It started with the tea. Every night, Garrett made me a cup of chamomile tea before bed. He'd started the habit about 8 months earlier, and I thought it was the sweetest thing. He'd bring it to me on the couch while I was reviewing pharmacy orders on my laptop, and he'd say,
"You work too hard, babe. Drink this and relax."
I'd smile, thank him, and drink every last drop. Then the dizziness started. Not the normal kind you get when you stand up too fast. This was different. A thick, heavy fog that rolled into my head every morning and didn't lift until noon. I'd be standing behind the pharmacy counter helping a customer, and suddenly the room would tilt sideways. My hands would go numb. My vision would blur around the edges like someone was smearing Vaseline on a camera lens. Then came the nausea. Waves of it crashing through me at random times. I'd be driving Zora to school and have to pull over because I thought I was going to be sick right there on the steering wheel. I lost 11 pounds in 2 months without trying. My skin looked gray. My eyes had dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide. I went to see Dr. Patrice Coleman, my physician over in the medical center. She ran blood work, checked my thyroid, tested for anemia, did a full metabolic panel. Everything came back normal. "You might just be stressed, Simone," she said. "Running a pharmacy, raising a daughter, managing a household, that takes a toll. Maybe try to get more sleep." More sleep. That's what everyone kept telling me. Get more sleep. But the thing was, I was sleeping. Too much, actually. 10, 11 hours a night and waking up feeling like I hadn't slept at all, like my body had been working overtime while my mind was unconscious. I'm a pharmacist. I know what drugs do to the human body. I know the side effects of every sedative, every anxiolytic, every sleep aid on the market. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice was whispering something I couldn't bear to hear. But I pushed it down. I buried it. Because the alternative was unthinkable. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday in late September. Garrett had gone to bed early, said he had a headache. I was on the couch watching television, too tired to move, but too wired to sleep. His phone was on the kitchen counter. He'd left it there when he went to get water, and he'd forgotten to take it back. It buzzed, then buzzed again, then a third time. I told myself not to look. I told myself that going through your husband's phone was a violation of trust. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then it buzzed a fourth time, and something inside me, some instinct that had been screaming for months, finally won. I picked up the phone. The lock screen showed message previews from a contact saved as Marcus R. 4 messages in a row. The first one said, "Increase to 15 milligrams. She needs to be weaker before the big night." The second, "Make sure you dissolve it completely. She's a pharmacist. If she tastes anything off, it's over." The third, "How's she responding to the current dose? Still dizzy." The fourth, "Don't lose your nerve now, baby. We're so close." My hands were shaking so hard the phone almost slipped out of my fingers. I read those messages 3 times, then a fourth. then a fifth. Each time, the words rearranged themselves into something worse. 15 milligrams, dissolve completely. She's a pharmacist, current dose, dizzy. I'm a pharmacist. Do you understand what that means? It means I knew exactly what those words meant. 15 milligrams is a specific dosage. Dissolve completely means a compound being mixed into liquid. Current dose means ongoing administration. Someone was giving Garrett instructions on how to drug me, and that someone knew I was a pharmacist, which meant they knew the drugs had to be undetectable to a trained professional. This wasn't a side project. This wasn't supplements. This was a protocol, a poisoning protocol, and I was the target. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. My fingers were trembling so badly it took me 3 tries to set it down straight on the counter. Then I walked to the bathroom, locked. The door sat on the edge of the tub and pressed both hands over my mouth to keep from screaming. My husband, the father of my child, the man sleeping 30 feet away from me right now. He was poisoning me. The next morning I went to the pharmacy before Garrett woke up. My hands were still shaking when I unlocked the front door. Terrell Banks, my pharmacy assistant, wasn't in yet. I had the place to myself. I went straight to the back to the lab area where we do compounding. I pulled out the chamomile tea bag from the night before. I'd fished it out of the trash before leaving the house, sealed it in a plastic bag. I ran a basic immunoassay screening, the kind we use for drug interaction checks. It took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of standing there staring at the test while my whole world crumbled around me like wet paper. The result came back positive for benzodiazepine, specifically a compound consistent with flunitrazepam at a low but sustained dosage. Flunitrazepam, you might know it by its street name, Rohypnol, the date rape drug. My husband had been putting Rohypnol in my tea every single night for months, low enough doses to avoid immediate detection, but high enough to cause all the symptoms I'd been experiencing: the dizziness, the nausea, the exhaustion, the mental fog, the weight loss, all of it. Every symptom Dr. Coleman couldn't explain. Every morning I woke up feeling like death. It was him. It was all him. I sat down on the pharmacy floor right there between the shelves of medication and I cried. Not loud, dramatic crying, silent crying. The kind where your whole body shakes but no sound comes out because the pain is too deep for noise. It lives in your bones. It lives in the marrow. That evening I tried one more thing. I had to be sure. I had to be absolutely certain before I let myself believe the worst about the man I'd married. Garrett made my tea as usual, brought it to me with a kiss on the forehead.
Here you go, babe. Long day today, huh?
I smiled. The longest. Thank you, baby. He went to check on Zora. The moment he left the room, I poured the tea into a sample container I'd hidden in my purse. I sealed it, labeled it with the date and time. Then I filled the mug with water from the tap, added a drop of honey for color, and drank it in front of him when he came back.
Good, he asked, watching me.
Perfect, I said, just what I needed. He smiled, that beautiful lying smile, and I smiled back. The next morning, I tested that sample. Same result. Flunitrazepam. Same concentration. Same compound that had been making me sick, making me weak, making me think I was losing my mind. I wanted to confront him right there. Wanted to walk into our bedroom and scream in his face and ask him why. Why would you do this to me? Why would you do this to the mother of your child? What did I ever do to you except love you? But I didn't, because somewhere between the pharmacy floor and that second test result, the grief had started hardening into something else, something colder, something sharper. I wasn't just his wife anymore. I was his target, and a target who knows she's being hunted has 2 choices: run or set a trap. I chose the trap. But what I discovered next made the poisoning look like the least of his plans, because Garrett wasn't working alone, and the woman helping him had done this before. I didn't sleep that night, not a single minute. I lay in bed next to Garrett, listening to him breathe, slow and even and peaceful, like a man without a single sin on his conscience. And I stared at the ceiling and made a plan. The first thing I needed was information, real information. Not guesses, not suspicions, not the kind of evidence that could be explained away with another one of Garrett's perfectly crafted lies. I needed to know everything. Who Marcus R. really was, what the big night meant, and how deep this went. Terrell Banks, my pharmacy assistant, had a younger brother who worked in IT for a cybersecurity firm downtown. I called Terrell the next morning and told him I needed a favor, a personal favor. No questions asked. To his credit, Terrell didn't ask a single question. He just said, "Whatever you need, Miss Carter." His brother Damon met me at a coffee shop on Westheimer that afternoon. I gave him Garrett's old tablet, the one he kept in his nightstand drawer, and thought I didn't know about. Garrett had upgraded to a new iPad months ago, but never wiped the old one. It was still synced to his iCloud. Damon had everything extracted within 48 hours, and what he found burned a hole through my chest so deep, I'm not sure it'll ever fully heal. First, Garrett had been fired from his pharmaceutical sales job 18 months ago, not laid off, not restructured, fired, for falsifying expense reports and stealing product samples. There was no new company. There had never been a new company. For a year and a half, my husband had been leaving the house every morning in a pressed shirt and slacks, driving to God knows where, and coming home every evening pretending he'd just finished a full day of work. Every single day, a performance, a one-man show starring Garrett Jerome Mitchell as the hard-working husband. Second, he was in debt, $85,000 in debt, online gambling, sports betting apps, poker sites. He'd opened 3 credit cards in his name alone, maxed them all out, and was paying minimum balances with cash advances from other cards. A spiral that had been spinning for over a year, and I never knew, not a clue. Third, the contact Marcus R. was not a man named Marcus. It was a woman named Yolanda Price, a former registered nurse whose license had been revoked 3 years ago for stealing controlled substances from the hospital where she worked. She and Garrett had been seeing each other for at least 14 months. The messages between them were not just romantic. They were strategic, clinical, like 2 people planning a military operation. And I was the target. Fourth, and this is the one that nearly broke me, Garrett had contacted my life insurance company 4 months earlier and submitted a beneficiary change form. The original beneficiary was Zora, my baby girl. If anything happened to me, everything was supposed to go to her held in trust until she turned 18. Garrett had changed it to himself. $750,000, redirected from my daughter to the man who was slowly killing me. I sat in my car in the parking lot of that coffee shop and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. I couldn't breathe, literally could not draw air into my lungs. My chest was locked. My throat was closed. The tears came so fast and so hot, they felt like they were burning channels down my face. Everything, every single thing about my marriage was a lie. The love, the laughter, the slow dance on our 6th anniversary, the tears when Zora was born, all of it. A con. A long, patient, meticulously crafted con designed to end with me dead and Garrett walking away with everything my father built. But I didn't have time to fall apart. Not yet. Because there was still the question that haunted me most. What was the big night Yolanda mentioned in that text? It didn't take long to figure out. Our 8th wedding anniversary was 11 weeks away. Garrett had already started talking about it.
We should do something big this year, babe. Something special. Invite everyone. I want the whole world to see how much I love my wife.
The whole world. 60 people. A big public celebration. The perfect stage for a tragedy that would look like an accident. 2 weeks later, Garrett's mother, Vivian, came to visit from Beaumont. Vivian Mitchell was a woman who had opinions about everything and kept none of them to herself. She'd never liked me, never thought I was good enough for her son. From the day Garrett introduced us, she'd looked at me the way you look at something stuck to the bottom of your shoe. We were sitting at the dinner table, Vivian, Garrett, and me. Zora was in bed. I'd cooked a full meal after a 12-hour shift at the pharmacy. Baked chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, cornbread. Vivian took one bite of the chicken and said, "It's dry." I didn't respond, I just kept eating. That's when Garrett leaned back in his chair, looked at his mother, and said the words that still ring in my ears to this day.
You'd be nothing without that little pharmacy your daddy left you. Nothing.
He said it so casually, like he was commenting on the weather, like he was stating an obvious fact that everyone already knew. And Vivian laughed, actually laughed. This sharp, cruel laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "He's right, you know," Vivian added, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. "Without that pharmacy, what are you, just another girl from Third Ward?" I sat there, fork in my hand, food turning to ash in my mouth, and I looked at this man. This man I'd supported for 8 years, this man who hadn't earned a single dollar in 18 months, this man who was sleeping in a house I paid for, eating food I bought, driving a car I financed, and he had the audacity to call me nothing. Something shifted in me that night. Not the breaking point. That came later. But a crack. A deep structural crack in the foundation of whatever love I still had left for Garrett Mitchell. Because you can forgive a lot of things. You can forgive laziness. You can forgive dishonesty. You can even forgive weakness. But contempt. Contempt from the mouth of a man who owes you everything while he gives you nothing. That you don't forgive, that you remember. I cleared the table without a word, washed the dishes without a word, kissed Zora goodnight without a word. And then I went into the bathroom, turned on the shower to cover the sound, and I cried. But these weren't the same tears from the coffee shop parking lot. These tears were different, hotter, harder. They tasted like iron instead of salt. After that night, I stopped drinking the tea. I'd been pouring it out secretly for a week already, but now I was methodical about it. Every night, Garrett handed me the mug. Every night, I pretended to sip while he watched. Every night, the moment he turned his back, I emptied it into a container, sealed it, labeled it with the date. Evidence, sample after sample after sample. Within 2 weeks of not ingesting the drug, my body started coming back to life. The fog lifted. The dizziness faded. My appetite returned. I gained back 4 pounds. I could think clearly again for the first time in months. And with that clarity came a rage so deep and so steady, it didn't even feel like anger anymore. It felt like architecture, like I was building something inside myself, beam by beam, brick by brick, something unshakable. I had the evidence of the poisoning. I had the text messages. I had the financial records. I had the insurance fraud. But I needed more, because Garrett wasn't just cheating on me and stealing from me. He was planning something for our 8th anniversary, something that was supposed to end my life. And the woman helping him, this Yolanda Price, this disgraced nurse with no license and no conscience, she was the key to everything I hadn't uncovered yet. What I found out about Yolanda Price is what turned this story from a betrayal into something far more terrifying. Because Yolanda hadn't just helped Garrett plan my murder. She'd done this before. And the last woman she helped destroy didn't survive to tell her story. I found out about Garrett's first wife on a Wednesday afternoon in early October. And when I say first wife, I need you to understand the weight of those 2 words. Because until that Wednesday, I didn't know there had been a first wife. Not a mention, not a photograph, not a single story from a single family member in 8 years of marriage. Garrett Jerome Mitchell had erased an entire human being from his history like she never existed. It started with Yolanda's name. Once Damon extracted the data from Garrett's tablet, I had her full name, her phone number, and her last known address in Katy, just west of Houston. I gave everything to Terrell and asked him to be my eyes and ears. I couldn't risk being seen investigating. Garrett was watching me too closely. But I also did my own digging. Late at night, after Garrett fell asleep, I'd take my laptop into the bathroom, sit on the tile floor with the door locked and search. Yolanda Price, former nurse, license revoked, Houston area. I found her nursing board disciplinary record online. Theft of controlled substances from Memorial Hermann Hospital. Termination, license revocation. Standard stuff for someone in her situation. Then I searched deeper. Court records, Harris County, Fort Bend County, Galveston County. I almost gave up after 2 hours of finding nothing. Then I tried a different search, Yolanda Price plus the word deceased. And that's when the ground opened up beneath me. A news article from the Galveston County Daily News dated 4 years ago. The headline read, "Galveston man's wife found dead, ruled accidental overdose." The article was short. A woman named Pamela Rousseau Mitchell, age 31, had been found unresponsive in her home in League City. Cause of death was listed as accidental overdose of prescription medication combined with alcohol. Her husband, Garrett J. Mitchell, told police she had a history of anxiety and had been taking medication for months. No foul play was suspected. Case closed. Pamela Rousseau Mitchell, Garrett J. Mitchell. My husband had been married before. His wife had died, and the death had been ruled an accident. I read that article so many times the words stopped looking like words. They became shapes, symbols, a code I was trying to crack with shaking hands and blurred vision. Pamela was 31, young, healthy according to her social media profiles, which I found next. She'd been a dental hygienist in League City. She liked gardening. She had a smile that lit up every photo she was in. And she was dead within 2 years of marrying Garrett. 2 years, the same timeline, the exact same pattern. I cross-referenced Yolanda's nursing board records with the timeline. Yolanda had been fired from Memorial Hermann 14 months before Pamela's death, which meant she was already out of the medical system, already disgraced, already desperate for money. The perfect accomplice for a man who needed access to drugs he couldn't get on his own. I couldn't prove it. Not yet. I didn't have the forensic evidence or the police reports, but the pattern was screaming at me so loud I could barely think straight. Garrett meets a woman with assets. Garrett marries her. Garrett connects with Yolanda. Wife starts getting sick. Wife dies. Garrett collects insurance money. Garrett disappears and starts over somewhere new. And now he was doing it again. To me, in my house, with my daughter sleeping down the hall. I closed my laptop and sat on that bathroom floor for a long time. The tile was cold against my legs. The house was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of the foundation settling. Somewhere on the other side of that door, my husband was sleeping soundly, dreaming about a future where I was dead and he was rich and free. Again, everything I believed was a lie. Every kiss, every smile, every "I love you," every tear he shed when Zora was born. All of it was part of a script he'd already rehearsed with another woman, a woman who was now in the ground. The grief hit me in waves that night, not just grief for my marriage, grief for Pamela, a woman I'd never met, a woman whose name I'd never heard until an hour ago, a woman who probably loved Garrett the same way I did, trusted him the same way I did, made excuses for him the same way I did, and she paid for that trust with her life. I whispered her name in that dark bathroom. Pamela. Just once, just to acknowledge that she existed, that she mattered, that someone finally knew what really happened to her. 2 days later, I tried one more time to reach through the wall of lies Garrett had built around us. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to hear him lie to my face one last time so I could kill the last shred of hope inside me. We were in the kitchen. Zora was watching cartoons in the living room. I kept my voice casual, my face neutral. Garrett, I was thinking about the anniversary party. You seem really excited about it.
He grinned, that grin. Of course I am, babe. It's going to be special, real special. I've got everything planned.
I bet you do, I said, and I watched his eyes for any flicker of guilt. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just confidence and that bottomless charm. I pushed a little further. You know, Denise has been saying I seem paranoid lately. Do you think I've been acting paranoid? Something shifted behind his eyes, just for a second. A flash of cold. Then it was gone, replaced by that warm, concerned husband expression he could put on like a mask.
Babe, listen.
He stepped closer, took my hands.
Denise means well, but she's a lawyer. She sees the worst in everyone. That's her job. You're not paranoid. You're just stressed. The pharmacy's Zora everything. You've got a lot on your plate.
I nodded slowly. So you don't think I'm being crazy?
He laughed. Actually laughed. Then he looked me dead in the eye and said the words that sealed his fate. Nobody's going to believe the paranoid pill counter over me. You know that, right?
He said it like a joke, like it was playful banter between husband and wife, but his eyes weren't laughing. His eyes were dead serious. And in that moment, I understood something with absolute clarity. Garrett wasn't just planning to kill me. He'd already built the narrative for after my death. The stressed-out wife, the overworked pharmacist, the woman who had access to too many pills and not enough sleep. If I died tonight, Garrett would stand at my funeral and cry those perfect tears and tell everyone.
I tried to help her. I told her to slow down, but she just couldn't stop.
And everyone would believe him, because that's what Garrett does. He makes you believe. I pulled my hands away gently, smiled at him. You're right, I said. I'm probably overthinking things.
That's my girl, he said, and kissed my cheek.
I walked out of that kitchen and into the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me had dark circles under her eyes and a jaw so tight it ached. But her eyes were clear, clearer than they'd been in months. That night at 2:17 in the morning, I picked up my phone and called Denise Howard. She answered on the second ring because that's the kind of friend Denise is, the kind who picks up at 2 in the morning without asking why. Denise, I said. My voice was steady, calm. The calm that comes after you've already decided what you're going to do. I need a lawyer, and I need a detective. My husband is trying to kill me, and I think he's done it before.
The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. Then Denise said, I'm on my way.
That phone call at 2 in the morning didn't just save my life. It started a chain of events that would destroy Garrett's world more completely than he ever planned to destroy mine. Denise was at my door by 3:15 in the morning. She didn't knock. She texted, I'm outside, and I slipped out the front door while Garrett snored in our bedroom, like a man who had absolutely nothing to worry about. We sat in her car in my driveway with the engine off and the windows cracked. October in Houston still holds heat even after midnight, and the air was thick and warm and smelled like jasmine from the neighbor's yard. I told her everything, the tea, the test results, the text messages, the gambling debts, the insurance fraud, Yolanda Price, and Pamela. When I said Pamela's name, Denise's hands tightened on the steering wheel so hard her knuckles went pale. She didn't interrupt me once. She just listened. And when I finished, she sat there for a long time, staring straight ahead at the dark street.
Simone, she said finally, we're going to destroy him, legally, completely, and permanently. But we have to be smart about this, smarter than he is.
I know, I said.
Can you keep pretending? Can you go home, lie next to that man, smile at him, let him make your tea, and not give anything away?
I thought about Pamela, a woman who never got the chance to fight back, a woman whose death was filed under accidental and forgotten. I thought about Zora, asleep in her bed, hugging the stuffed elephant I'd given her on her 4th birthday. I thought about what would happen to my daughter if I failed, if Garrett succeeded. Zora would grow up with the man who murdered her mother. He'd spend her inheritance. He'd move Yolanda into our home. He'd tell Zora that Mommy was sick, that Mommy took too many pills, that Mommy just couldn't handle the pressure. And my baby would grow up believing that lie, believing her mother was weak, believing her mother gave up. That image, Zora sitting at the kitchen table across from Yolanda Price eating breakfast in my house, calling that woman by some nickname, while the truth of what happened to me rotted in a closed police file. That image burned through every last ounce of fear in my body and left nothing behind but steel. Yes, I said to Denise, I can pretend. I've been married to an actor for 8 years. It's time I gave my own performance. Denise moved fast. By Friday of that same week, she'd connected me with Detective Brenda Hayes of the Houston Police Department Major Assaults Division. Detective Hayes was a black woman in her late 40s with short silver locks and the kind of eyes that had seen too much of the world to be surprised by any of it. We met at Denise's office in Montrose, behind a locked door with the blinds drawn. I laid everything on the table, literally. The sealed tea samples, each one labeled with date and time. The printouts of Garrett's text messages with Yolanda, the financial records showing the gambling debts and the insurance beneficiary change, and the news article about Pamela Rousseau Mitchell. Detective Hayes studied each piece of evidence without saying a word. She picked up the article about Pamela and read it twice. Then she looked up at me.
Mrs. Carter, do you understand what you're suggesting?
I'm not suggesting anything, Detective. I'm showing you a pattern. His first wife died under suspicious circumstances with the same woman involved. Now he's using the same method on me. Same drugs, same accomplice, same endgame.
Hayes nodded slowly. The Galveston County case was ruled accidental. Reopening it would take time and cooperation from their department. But what's happening to you right now that's active? That's in my jurisdiction. And what you've given me is more than enough to open an investigation. She paused, then leaned forward. But here's the problem. If we arrest him now, all we've got is the poisoning. That's serious, but a good defense attorney could argue the dosages were low, that he was giving you a sleep aid without your knowledge, that it was misguided, but not malicious. He could plead down to aggravated assault, maybe serve 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years, I repeated. The words tasted like ash.
But if we wait, Hayes continued, if we let him execute his plan for the anniversary dinner, if we catch him in the act of administering a lethal dose in front of witnesses, that's attempted first-degree murder. That's 25 to life. And combined with the evidence from Pamela's case, we could push for consecutive sentences. He'd never see the outside of a prison again.
I understood what she was asking me to do. She was asking me to walk into that anniversary dinner knowing my husband was going to try to kill me. She was asking me to smile and hold his hand and let him pour poison into my glass while 60 people watched. She was asking me to trust that she and her team would be there to stop it before it was too late. I'll do it, I said, no hesitation, no trembling. I'll do it for me, and I'll do it for Pamela. The plan came together over the next 6 weeks. Detective Hayes assigned 2 undercover officers to attend the anniversary dinner, posing as a couple. She coordinated with the restaurant The Monarch Room in Midtown Houston to install a discreet camera at the bar area where the champagne would be served. Denise prepared emergency legal documents, a restraining order, a divorce petition, and a custody filing, all ready to be executed the moment Garrett was in handcuffs. My brother Malcolm drove down from Dallas the week before the dinner. He didn't say much when I told him. Malcolm is a man of few words, always has been. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan, and the things he saw over there taught him that words are cheap and action is everything. He sat at my kitchen table, listened to the whole story, and when I finished, he said just 3 words.
I'm here, Moan.
But Malcolm did more than just show up. He started watching Garrett, following him. Not closely enough to be noticed, but close enough to learn his patterns. And that's how he caught the phone call. It was 5 days before the anniversary dinner. Garrett was sitting in his car in the parking lot of a Target on Kirby Drive, talking on the phone. Malcolm was parked 3 rows behind him. He couldn't hear the conversation, but he had a parabolic microphone he'd borrowed from a buddy who did private security work, former military. They have access to things most people don't. The recording was crystal clear. Garrett's voice laughing, confident, dripping with the arrogance of a man who believed he was untouchable.
She doesn't suspect a thing, baby. She's so weak from the doses, she can barely think straight. 5 more days and it's over.
Yolanda's voice on the other end, and then it's just us.
Just us. And $750,000, plus the pharmacy once I get custody of Zora and control of the estate.
What about her brother?
Said Malcolm. Garrett laughed. Please, he's all the way in Dallas. By the time he finds out, I'll have liquidated everything and will be in Costa Rica.
Then Garrett said something that Malcolm had to play for me 3 times because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. His voice dropped lower, almost tender, the same voice he used when he whispered sweet nothings to me.
You think you're so smart because you can read labels. You can't even keep your own husband happy.
He was talking about me, mocking me, to the woman he was sleeping with, using the same mouth that kissed me goodnight every evening. Malcolm played that recording for me in Denise's office. I sat perfectly still. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I was past crying, past rage, past everything except the cold architectural certainty that this man was going to pay for every single word. 5 more days, I said to Denise and Malcolm. 5 more days and he walks into his own trap. I went home that night and kissed Zora goodnight. She wrapped her little arms around my neck and said, "Mommy, you smell like medicine." I laughed. "That's because Mommy works with medicine, baby. Are you going to make everybody better?" I held her tighter. "Yes, baby. Mommy's going to make everything better, I promise." The anniversary dinner was 5 days away. 60 guests had been invited. My husband was planning to toast to our love while poisoning me to death, and I was going to let him. Because sometimes the best way to catch a predator is to let him think he's already won. The 5 days leading up to the anniversary dinner were the longest of my life. Every minute felt like an hour. Every hour felt like a day. And through all of it, I had to be perfect. Perfect wife. Perfect smile. Perfect performance. One wrong look, one misplaced word, one moment of hesitation, and Garrett would know something was off. And if he knew, he'd run. Or worse, he'd accelerate. So I became the woman he thought I was. Weak, trusting, oblivious. I drank the tea he made me every night, except I didn't. I'd perfected a technique over the past few weeks. Lift the mug, press the rim to my lips, tilt it just enough for the liquid to touch my mouth without actually swallowing, then set it down. When he left the room, I'd pour it into the container, seal it, label it, add it to the collection hidden in a locked drawer at the pharmacy. On Monday, 4 days before the dinner, Garrett came home with a garment bag. New suit, charcoal gray, Italian cut. He hung it on the bedroom door and stood back admiring it like he'd just bought a trophy.
"What do you think, babe?" he asked, turning to me with that grin.
I looked at that suit and thought about how he'd look wearing it in a mugshot. "It's beautiful," I said. "You're going to look amazing."
"Only the best for our big night," he said.
Then he crossed the room, cupped my face in his hands, and kissed my forehead.
"I want everything to be perfect, Simone. This anniversary is going to change our lives."
"I know it will," I said, and I meant every word, just not the way he thought I did. On Wednesday, 2 days before the dinner, I sent Zora to stay with Malcolm at his hotel near the Galleria. I told Garrett that Malcolm wanted some uncle-niece bonding time before he drove back to Dallas. Garrett didn't question it. He was too focused on his plan to notice anything outside of it. That night, after Garrett fell asleep, I stood in Zora's empty bedroom. Her stuffed elephant was on the pillow. Her little shoes were lined up by the door, smallest to largest, because she liked them organized that way. The nightlight, shaped like a crescent moon, cast a soft glow across the ceiling. I sat on her bed and pressed my face into her pillow and breathed in the scent of her shampoo. Johnson's baby shampoo, the one with the lavender on the label. "I'm doing this for you," I whispered into the dark. "Everything I'm about to do is for you." Thursday, 1 day before the dinner. I met with Detective Hayes one final time at a secure location, a conference room in the back of a law firm on Main Street that Denise had arranged. Hayes walked me through the plan step by step.
2 of my officers will be inside the restaurant posing as a couple celebrating their own anniversary. They'll be seated at the table closest to the bar area. I'll be in an unmarked vehicle outside with 2 additional units. We've coordinated with the restaurant management. There's a camera covering the champagne service area.
"What about the champagne itself?" I asked.
"That's the critical piece," Hayes said. "We need him to physically administer the substance in your glass. We need it captured on camera, and we need the glass preserved as evidence before anyone drinks from it. Our forensic team will be standing by to collect and test the contents on site.
So I take the glass from him, but I don't drink.
Correct. You take the glass. You hold it. You let him make his toast. But under no circumstances do you drink. The moment we have visual confirmation of him administering the substance, my officers will move in.
I nodded. And Yolanda...
Hayes allowed herself a small, tight smile. Miss Price will be picked up simultaneously at her residence in Katy. We've had surveillance on her apartment since last week. She's not going anywhere.
I left that meeting feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness, not relief, something harder than that. Purpose. Every step I took on that sidewalk felt deliberate. Every breath felt intentional. I was walking toward the most dangerous night of my life, and I was walking toward it with my eyes wide open. Friday, October 18th, the day of the dinner. I spent the morning at the pharmacy filling prescriptions, counseling patients, doing inventory. Normal things, routine things. The kind of things that keep your hands busy while your mind is somewhere else entirely. Terrell noticed I was quieter than usual. He put a hand on my shoulder around lunchtime and said, "You good, Miss Carter?" "I will be," I said, "after tonight." I went home at 3 in the afternoon to get ready. Garrett was already there, which surprised me. He was in the bedroom, freshly showered, his new suit laid out on the bed. He was humming. Actually humming. A man preparing to murder his wife, and he was humming a Marvin Gaye song, like he was getting ready for prom.
"There she is," he said when I walked in. "My beautiful wife. You better wear something stunning tonight, babe. All eyes are going to be on us."
I chose a black dress. Simple, elegant, fitted but not tight. I did my makeup in the bathroom mirror, slow and precise. Foundation, concealer to hide the dark circles that still hadn't fully faded. Mascara, a dark red lip. I looked at myself and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked calm, composed, powerful. Nothing like the trembling, foggy, nauseous woman I'd been 3 months ago. I slipped my phone into my clutch, recording app ready. Denise had helped me set it to activate with a single tap. We drove to the Monarch room together. Garrett held my hand in the car. His palm was dry, steady. Not a trace of nervousness. This man was about to commit murder in a room full of 60 people, and his hands were dry. I filed that detail away in a place inside me where I kept all the proof that the man I married was not a man at all. He was something else, something hollow wearing a human suit. The restaurant was beautiful. Candles on every table, white tablecloths, a jazz quartet playing soft standards in the corner. Our guests were already arriving. Family, friends, co-workers from the pharmacy, neighbors, people from church. Pastor Raymond Ellis was there in his best suit, shaking hands and smiling that warm, pastoral smile. And then I saw her. A woman I'd never met in person, but whose face I'd memorized from every photo Damon had extracted from Garrett's tablet. Tall, light-skinned, high cheekbones. She was wearing a deep burgundy dress and standing near the bar with a champagne flute already in her hand, laughing with one of Garrett's college friends like she belonged there. Yolanda Price, in my restaurant at my anniversary dinner, standing 20 feet from me sipping champagne that I paid for.
Garrett caught me looking and said casually, "Oh, that's Yolanda, old colleague from my sales days. I invited her last minute. Hope that's okay."
I looked at him, at his easy smile, at his dry, steady hands, at the suit he bought with my money to wear to the dinner where he planned to kill me, and I felt something open up inside my chest. Not anger, not fear, something beyond both of those. "Of course," I said, smiling so wide my cheeks ached. "The more the merrier."
Garrett squeezed my hand. "That's my girl."
The dinner was served. The conversation flowed. Garrett worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, telling jokes, playing the devoted husband with a skill that would have been impressive if it wasn't so evil. I watched Yolanda across the room. She never looked at me directly, not once, but twice I caught her eyes meet Garrett's, and in those split-second glances I saw everything: anticipation, excitement, the shared thrill of two predators closing in on their prey. After dessert, Garrett stood up and clinked his glass with a fork. The room went quiet. 60 faces turned toward him.
If everyone could give me just a moment, he said, his voice warm and thick with false emotion. I'd like to get the champagne for a very special toast.
He walked to the bar. I watched him go. And across the room, I saw Detective Hayes's 2 undercover officers shift slightly in their seats, alert, ready, watching. Garrett picked up 2 champagne flutes from the counter. He positioned his body so his back was to the room. And then, with a motion so quick and practiced it couldn't have been his first time, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small glass vial, and emptied its contents into one of the glasses. He walked back to me carrying both glasses. His face was radiant, glowing. The face of a man who believed he was about to get everything he ever wanted. He handed me the glass with so much confidence, so much satisfaction in his eyes. He thought this was his moment of triumph. He had no idea it was his last moment of freedom. Garrett stood in front of 60 people with his champagne glass raised high, and he gave the performance of his life.
8 years ago, he began his voice carrying across the room with the ease of a man born to deceive. I walked into a little pharmacy on Wheeler Avenue and met the most incredible woman I've ever known, Simone Carter. The woman who gave me a family, the woman who gave me a home, the woman who gave me everything.
He paused. Let the silence build. 60 people were hanging on every word. Yolanda was standing near the back of the room with her burgundy dress and her champagne flute, watching with an expression that anyone else would have mistaken for admiration. I knew better. That was anticipation. She was watching a plan come together.
To my beautiful wife, Garrett continued, turning to face me. His eyes were shining, like he was about to cry. You are my whole world, and tonight, I want to celebrate the woman who has made every single day of my life worth living. He raised his glass higher. To Simone, to 8 more years, to forever.
The room erupted. To Simone. Glasses clinked everywhere. People smiled and cheered. Pastor Ellis said amen from his table. Garrett's mother, Vivian, was dabbing her eyes with a napkin, like she was watching the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Then Garrett looked at me, looked at the glass in my hand, the glass he'd poisoned 60 seconds ago, and he said the words I'd been waiting for.
Drink up, baby. You deserve it.
His smile, that beautiful lying smile, the same smile he gave Pamela Rousseau before she went to sleep and never woke up. The same smile he'd been giving me for 8 years while he studied my weaknesses and cataloged my vulnerabilities and calculated exactly how much I was worth. Dead. I looked at that smile, and then I smiled back. Before I drink, I said, my voice clear and steady, I'd like to make a toast of my own, if that's okay. Garrett blinked, a flicker of surprise. This wasn't part of his script, but he recovered fast because that's what he does.
Of course, babe. The floor is yours.
I stood up, smoothed my black dress, held the poisoned glass in my right hand where everyone could see it, and I looked out at 60 faces, family, friends, neighbors, people who loved me, people who trusted Garrett, people who had no idea they were about to witness the unmasking of a monster. 8 years ago, I married a man I believed loved me. I said. My voice didn't shake, not even a little. For 8 years, I cooked for him. I paid every bill. I supported his career, or what I thought was his career. I gave him a daughter. I gave him access to everything my father spent 30 years building. The room was getting quiet, not the comfortable quiet of people listening to a heartfelt speech, a different quiet, The kind of quiet that happens when the air pressure changes right before a storm. 3 months ago, I continued, I discovered that the man standing next to me has been drugging me every night, putting a sedative called flunitrazepam, also known as Rohypnol, into the tea he made me before bed. For months. That's why I've been sick. That's why I've been losing weight. That's why I could barely stand behind my own pharmacy counter some mornings. The silence was deafening now. Absolute. Not a fork moving, not a glass clinking, not a single breath audible in that room. 60 people frozen in their seats. Garrett's face didn't change immediately. It took about 3 seconds. 3 seconds for the words to travel from his ears to his brain and detonate.
She's crazy, he said, and his voice was still smooth, still controlled, but something underneath it had cracked. She's been paranoid for months. Don't listen to this. She needs help.
I held up the champagne glass. Then you won't mind drinking from my glass, Garrett. Right here, right now, in front of everyone. If there's nothing in it, you have nothing to worry about. The color drained from his face, not slowly, all at once. Like someone pulled a plug and every drop of blood just fell straight to his feet. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. His hand, the one holding his own champagne glass, started trembling so violently that champagne splashed over the rim and onto his new charcoal suit. That's what I thought, I said. I turned back to the room. This glass contains GHB, Gamma-hydroxybutyrate, a lethal dose when combined with alcohol. My husband put it in this glass 60 seconds ago at that bar counter. I pointed. And there's a camera right there that recorded every second of it. Garrett's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. His knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the table with both hands, knuckles, white arms shaking. Sweat was beading on his forehead, rolling down his temples. His breathing was fast and shallow, the breathing of an animal caught in a trap.
Simone, wait, he gasped. Let me explain. This isn't what it looks like. I would never hurt you. I love you. Please.
That's when Detective Hayes's 2 officers stood up from their table, badges out. The woman spoke first, her voice cutting through the chaos with surgical precision.
Garrett Jerome Mitchell, you're under arrest for attempted murder in the first-degree conspiracy to commit murder insurance fraud and forgery. You have the right to remain silent.
The room exploded. Gasps. Screams. Someone knocked over a chair. Pastor Ellis stood up with his hand on his chest. Vivian Mitchell was frozen in her seat, her napkin still pressed against her eyes, except now those eyes were wide with a horror she couldn't fake. And Yolanda. I turned to look at her. She was already moving toward the exit, her burgundy dress swishing against her legs as she tried to slip through the crowd unnoticed. But the second undercover officer was faster. He cut her off at the door.
Yolanda Price, don't move. You're under arrest.
Yolanda's face crumbled. Not slowly, instantly, like a building demolished from the inside. She looked across the room at Garrett, and in that look I saw the death of whatever twisted loyalty had bound them together. She wasn't a partner anymore. She was a witness, looking for a deal. Garrett was on the floor now. Not standing, not sitting. On his knees, hands cuffed behind his back, tears and sweat mixing on his face. His voice, that smooth, charming, silver-tongued voice that had talked 2 women into loving him and 1 woman into her grave, was cracking and breaking like a teenage boy's.
Simone, please. I'm sorry, I'll change. I swear to God I'll change. Think about Zora, please. Think about our daughter.
I walked toward him, slowly. My heels clicking on the hardwood floor was the only sound in that room. 60 people watching, 60 witnesses to the moment a predator became prey. I stopped 3 feet in front of him, looked down at this man on his knees. This man who called me nothing. This man who called me a paranoid pill counter. This man who planned to murder me the same way he murdered Pamela and then fly to Costa Rica with my money and my daughter's inheritance. You said I'd be nothing without my daddy's pharmacy. I said quietly. Quietly enough that only the first few tables could hear, but quietly enough that every word landed like a hammer. Look around, Garrett. You're the one with nothing now. No wife, no daughter, no money, no freedom, nothing. He sobbed, an ugly broken sound that came from somewhere deep in his chest. And don't you dare say Zora's name. I continued, my voice dropping even lower. You were planning to make her motherless for $750,000. You don't get to use her as a bargaining chip. I straightened up, took one last look at him. The charcoal suit was stained with champagne and sweat. His perfect hair was disheveled. His eyes were red and swollen and utterly empty of everything except fear. You're not sorry, Garrett. You're just sorry you got caught. I turned around, walked toward the door. Denise was standing there holding my coat. Malcolm was next to her, arms crossed, jaw-tight eyes locked on Garrett with the kind of cold, controlled fury that only a man who's been to war can carry without it spilling over. I didn't look back, not once. The night air hit my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk. October in Houston, warm and thick and alive. I tilted my head back and looked up at the sky. No stars, too much city light. But the moon was there, a crescent, just like Zora's nightlight. I breathed in, deep, all the way to the bottom of my lungs, and then I breathed out. And something left my body with that breath. Something heavy and dark and suffocating that had been sitting on my chest for years. I was free. The trial started 5 months later in a Harris County courtroom on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember the weather, 63 degrees, overcast, the kind of gray sky that looks like it can't decide whether to rain or just hang there being heavy. Garrett sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit. He'd lost at least 20 pounds since the arrest. His cheeks were hollow. His eyes were sunken into his skull like two dark holes. His hands cuffed in front of him trembled nonstop. That same man who had hummed Marvin Gaye while preparing to murder me couldn't even hold a pen steady enough to sign his own name on court documents. His attorney, a public defender named Watkins, tried everything. Tried to argue the dosages were low, tried to argue Garrett was mentally unwell, tried to argue the camera footage was inconclusive. None of it worked. The evidence was a wall, text messages, voice recordings, tea samples, toxicology reports. The camera footage from the Monarch room showing Garrett pouring the contents of that vial into my glass with the precision of a man who had practiced the motion 100 times. And then Yolanda took the stand. She'd cut a deal with the prosecution, full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence, and she gave them everything. Every detail, every conversation, every text, every plan. She described the poisoning protocol she'd designed for Garrett, how she'd calculated the dosages, how she'd taught him to dissolve the compound so it would be undetectable in hot liquid. She described their relationship, 14 months of secret meetings in hotels across Galveston and Katy and League City. And then the prosecutor asked her about Pamela. Yolanda went quiet for a long time. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear. She nodded, and then she said the words that sealed Garrett's fate forever.
I helped him with Pamela too. Same method, same drugs. He told me she was abusive. He told me he was scared of her. I believed him at first. But after she died, I knew. I knew what we'd done. And when he came to me about Simone, I knew what he was planning. I went along with it because he promised me half the insurance money. I'm not proud of it, but that's the truth.
Garrett erupted, jumped to his feet, screamed across the courtroom.
She's lying. She planned everything. I was just following her instructions.
His attorney grabbed his arm and tried to pull him down. The judge slammed her gavel so hard the sound echoed off the walls. 2 bailiffs moved toward Garrett and forced him back into his chair. But the damage was done. The jury saw it. 60 people at the anniversary dinner had already seen who Garrett really was, and now 12 jurors saw it too. The mask was gone, completely, permanently. The verdict came back in 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, forgery, And with the reopened investigation into Pamela's death, an additional charge of second-degree murder. Garrett was sentenced to 22 years. No possibility of parole for the first 15. When the judge read the sentence, Garrett made a sound I will never forget. A low, broken moan that came from somewhere deeper than his throat, deeper than his chest. It came from the place where his soul should have been if he had one. Yolanda received 12 years. Garrett's mother, Vivian, was charged with accessory after the fact and obstruction. She'd known about the insurance change and said nothing. 3 years supervised probation. The woman who laughed when her son called me, nothing, couldn't even look at me during her hearing. 1 year after the trial, I stood in front of Carter Family Pharmacy on Wheeler Avenue, but the sign was different now. New letters, gold on black. Carter Zora Family Pharmacy. I'd added my daughter's name, because this wasn't just my father's legacy anymore. It was hers. Business was up 60%. The community rallied around me in ways I didn't know were possible. Customers who'd been coming to that pharmacy for decades brought their children, their grandchildren, their neighbors. Miss Dorothy, now 87 years old, grabbed my hand one Saturday morning during the free blood pressure screening and said, "Your daddy is smiling down on you, baby, smiling so big the angels can see it." I cried in the back room for 10 minutes after she said that. Zora is 7 now. She's in 2nd grade. She reads above her level. She has her grandfather's eyes and her mama's stubbornness and a laugh that can fill an entire house. She's in therapy age-appropriate sessions with a child psychologist who specializes in family trauma. She doesn't fully understand what happened yet, but she knows Daddy did something very bad and Daddy has to go away for a long time. And she knows Mommy kept her safe. That's enough for now. Malcolm moved to Houston permanently. He runs security for the pharmacy and 3 other small businesses in the neighborhood. Denise is still my best friend, still my lawyer, still the woman who picks up the phone at 2 in the morning without asking why. I'm not dating. I'm not ready. Maybe one day. But right now, I'm learning something I should have learned a long time ago. How to love myself first. How to trust my own instincts before I trust someone else's words. How to stand in my own pharmacy, in my own life, in my own skin, and know that I am enough. Without a man, without permission, without apology. My name is Simone Elise Carter. I'm 35 years old. I'm a pharmacist, a mother, a daughter, a sister, a survivor. And I am nobody's victim. Not anymore. Not ever again. If you're listening to this and something doesn't feel right in your relationship, trust that feeling. Don't wait. Don't make excuses. Don't convince yourself you're being paranoid. Your gut is trying to save your life. Listen to it. Because I almost didn't, and it nearly cost me everything. The morning after the verdict, I took Zora to the park. She ran through the sprinklers in her little yellow rain boots, laughing so hard her whole body was shaking. Water flying everywhere, sun hitting the droplets like tiny diamonds in the air, and I just stood there watching her tears rolling down my face. Not sad tears, not angry tears, grateful tears. Because I almost didn't get to see this. I almost didn't get to hear that laugh. Garrett almost took this moment from me, from us, but he didn't, because I fought, because I survived, because I chose myself. And that's everything. Remember this, your worth is not measured by how much someone else values you. It's measured by how fiercely you protect your own life when someone tries to take it from you. If this story moved, you drop a comment and tell me what part hit you the hardest. Share your own story if you have one. You're not alone. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this. Because these stories matter. Your stories matter. And together we're proof that the truth always wins. Always.